It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the two business owners of the sports podcast called the Pinstripe Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started with a New York Yankees sports podcast?
Well, a big thing that we wanted to do is both of us, I plan on going to school for sports communication. Lexi's going to school for sports communications right now. And so the idea of kind of getting something going for us, starting to introduce ourselves into kind of that industry as early as possible is really good. A podcast was a great opportunity for us to do it. Luckily, Lexi wanted to start one, and then she asked me, and I go, that'll be fun. It's a good way to introduce myself, kind of something I haven't done before. And I think that was a big influence on everything.
How did you know that you wanted to come up with the name of your podcast, the Pinstripe Podcast?
So we wanted to use a title that obviously showed what we were talking about, and the pinstripes are just unanimous to the New York Yankees. Like any other team can wear pinstripes, but you always just think about how the Yankees do it best, I think, and also are just the originals to do it. And honestly, there are so many Yankee podcasts out there. Obviously, we have, I think, the best fan base in the world. So there's a lot of people that want to talk about the team. So it's hard to find a name that, has the word Yankees in it. There's also like the whole trouble of like trademarks and if you're allowed to use it and make money off of it, whatever. So pinstripe is kind of a word that you associate with the Yankees, but there's no like actual paperwork that you have to go through to use it. And I don't know, I liked the alliteration of pinstripe and podcast. I sent it to Scotty when I was originally planning the podcast. Like he said, I came up with the idea and then I just kind of threw it at him. I was like, would you want to do this? And he was like, yeah, name makes sense. Sure. So that's how we came up with it.
What were some of the names that were also included in it?
Oh goodness. I think we threw around just having pod, right, Scotty, not the podcast.
Yeah.
I tried to like consult my friends to come up with some, but I go to school in Boston and most of them are Red Sox fans. So none of them wanted to even help me. So we kind of just got to Pinstripe Podcast and I was like, Scotty, do you have any other ideas? He was like, nope, makes sense. I don't know if he ever had anyone's.
Are y'all both Yankees fans? Are y'all both Yankees fans? I can see yes. Scotty has a thing in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we grew up Yankee fans, and baseball has always been like he played baseball, I play softball, like it's just always been a big part of our lives. So talking about the Yankees just like made sense. I don't know.
What are some of the topics that you talk about in your podcast?
Yeah, so we've done during the season, we kind of summarize the week that the team had. So it'll be like, this worked well. Why did, Garrett Cole's outing this day was really good, but then Jordan Montgomery came out and threw a terrible game. Why is so-and-so why isn't Clint Frazier playing? What's going on? But then we also try to wrap up at the end of the episode to just talk about general league news, because at the end of the day, yeah, we're Yankee fans, but we're also just huge baseball nerds. So we just always know what's going on in the league. So we talked about I love seeing women in sports as a woman who wants to be in sports. So like the Kim Ang hiring as the GM of the Marlins and stuff like that. And then in the off season, Scotty, do you want to talk about what we've done in the off season?
Yeah. So in the off season, we decided to go and do we call it our deep dive. So each week we'd go and choose a different team from around the league, to kind of look into their lineup, see how they did in 2020, and just see how they've changed, what they can improve on, and like what they're doing well. We've done that with a lot of teams, and we have a lot of different emotions with a lot of different teams. You can tell in each one of our episodes. We either will be like, hey, this is a good team. Sometimes we'll be like, yeah, I don't really know where they're going to be going with everything. So it's, we've been doing that every week. Now we're kind of bringing it back now that baseball's starting up again. So we're going back into focusing on what's going on really around the league baseball wise.
What are some of your plans for when baseball does come back?
Scotty, you want to go ahead?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So probably a big thing that we're going to do. I mean, we're starting to kind of run into it now that spring training's starting, is we're getting more of the league updates of how players are playing and what they're doing on the field. And so we're seeing these new teams as people were traded, signed, and everything like that. And so we're kind of seeing how people fit in with their teams, kind of how they look in their new uniforms, kind of with their new team around them, everything like that. And we're still getting into the topic, especially now we're able to talk about Yankee players. I mean, during the offseason, we really weren't able to talk much because there really wasn't a ton of news all the time. But we're finally being able to go back to I'd like to say more of a podcast focused on the Yankees. Now that baseball is starting up again, we're able to see them play.
Yeah, like we could, sorry.
Go on.
We could like theorize all we wanted, how we thought like Corey Kluber would add to the rotation. But now we're actually like getting videos and like clips of him, not only like in uniform, but pitching in uniform. And it's just like, it's exciting to actually be able to talk about it instead of just being like, so the Yankees gave him some money. That's all that we have. We can actually talk about things that we're seeing.
What are some of your future plans with your Yankees podcast, The Pinstripe?
So I've been reaching out to some fellow American League East based podcasts, so like Blue Jays podcast, stuff like that, to see if they would want to like work together. Like we sit and we go, like if we have a stand against the Blue Jays, we can come together at the end of it and kind of put an episode together with them to talk about, how we thought they thought we did, maybe switch the other way around, just to kind of find more people to talk about with baseball, because I love talking to Scotty about baseball. I love it so much, but it is nice to like hear other people's opinions. And especially I think that it's really cool to see opinions of other teams' fans looking at the Yankees, because we're very good at seeing the Yankees and being like, yeah, they're fantastic. They're great. They never do anything wrong except like every now and then. But to see like the point of view of like a Blue Jays fan to say like, okay, well, this part of your lineup is a threat. This part we're not worried about. I think is not only a fun perspective for us to hear, but also for like listeners to hear.
Are there any people that you have interviewed that are Yankees fans or even like former players?
We haven't had the opportunity to do many interviews simply because we've just been focusing on trying to get like our groundwork done. I wish I could say that we've like interviewed a whole bunch of people. But I'm hoping this summer I have an opportunity within like an internship. I don't know if I'm allowed to say where I'm working just because I don't want to get in trouble, but I'm hoping that can lead to some nice connections that can maybe give us a nice little guest spot on the show.
Have y'all gone to any Yankee games to like broadcast live stream, like that kind of eerie?
I wish. We only started the show. I started the show in February of last year. So unfortunately, we've not been able to go to a baseball game in person since the show started. But we always like to call back to any times that we've been to games, or no matter if it's been a Yankee game or at a different stadium, just because it's nice to make that like connection with the game. So unfortunately, we haven't had the show during fan baseball, but we'll see.
Starting off with you, Scotty, what is something that you learned now that you didn't know beforehand?
So a few big things that I've really learned from this, from once we started. a big issue that I had, and I was always told, is I was never projecting my voice enough. I was always a very, very quiet. You could always barely hear me in the back, especially at the beginning when we started with a few audio issues of how that was. But I learned through that it's important both projecting your voice, and I think that another very important thing is the emotion, kind of having an opinion on things, because that really kind of makes it not as robotic and automatic, and you kind of get a lot more emotion and almost connected as a listener if you are like talking, if you're hearing somebody and they're not just saying everything that's going on, they kind of have their emotions and their opinions behind them. I feel like as a podcast, that kind of makes it a lot better for the listener to hear somebody, and in some cases even want to go and argue against the person in the podcast, because I feel like that kind of still makes that connection of listener to creator, and I think that is very important.
Lexi, what have you learned now that you didn't know beforehand?
I have learned that I have way more opinions than I thought I did. When I was keeping it all like bottled up and just like reading like whatever the Bleacher Report or the tweet or whatever, I would like think about it and internalize it and be like, I don't really like that, but okay. But now, like once Scotty and I start the conversation, I'm like, hold on, this is way more important to me than I thought it was. Let's break this down. And I've also really kind of found the direction that I want to go with professionally. Because for a while I thought that I wanted to be a broadcaster. And while I think that would be a lot of fun, I have recognized that my opinions might not work that well as a play-by-play or color commentator. I might be not too great at holding my opinions back. But I've been running our Instagram page, and creating the content for that has really brought me a lot of joy and a lot of like fulfillment. So it helped me, not only is this helping me, talk about baseball and get all my opinions out, but it has also really helped me like find my path that I want to go through like for the rest of my life, which is like crazy. And I didn't expect that to come from this. I thought this was just going to be like a fun hobby and bonding experience for me and my brother, but it's given me a lot more than that.
What are some of y'all's future plans with the podcast?
That's a great question. Scotty, do you have any? Or, I mean, I can think of some, but.
I mean, currently, just staying through as long as possible. Of course, that's a base future plan, but kind of also going back to like the whole thing with the interviews. I think that that's probably a huge plan that we want to make in the future. One podcast that I really enjoy personally, I really enjoy watching the Pat McAfee show. And I just think that the interactions that he has with like the people that he interviews, just kind of being able to reach out to players or coaches, fans, everything like that, and just having that connection is really big. And I think that having that there and kind of that's kind of what I want to look for in the future, whether that's really much how possible that is or how soon that can happen, although that's unsure, but that's probably like a big plan that I want to have in general.
Yeah, I mean, like, to me, like, I feel like the like perfect dream as a Yankee podcast is you're like working with like John Boy, or like, I don't personally like love Barstool, but like some big media company that is also like passionate about sports. That's like the super goal, is like you can actually do this for a living. That's crazy. But I think in like a more like realistic viewpoint, I really just want this to be something for like me to do with him and whatever our audience is, to kind of just find like a little hole in the internet that we can sit and talk about baseball, but also use it to kind of propel ourselves forward into other like professional endeavors. Like Scotty was saying, he's going to school to do this. And I mean, being able to help him like accomplish his dreams like that makes me feel really good as an older sister. I'm like, this did something. I didn't just like waste an hour of his Thursdays every week.
That's wonderful. Where can my listeners, what advice would you give to future Yankee podcasts and even future sports fan podcasts?
I mean, if you want to start your own, it's really simple. Like it's not, it seems a lot harder than it is. You know, you don't even need an actual mic setup. Like you can just use your headphone mic. Like they're all pretty good right now. Just do it. Like just dive in and do it. It doesn't matter. Like, yeah, having like this giant, massive audience is probably like lots of fun and it makes you feel really accomplished. But like we're at 36 episodes right now. And like, I have never been prouder of like anything. I'm like, we have committed that time to create the episode, edit it, do whatever. Like it is really fun to have like a passion project that you can share so easily because podcasts are one, they're so huge right now and they're so easy to share with people. So I say just do it.
Scotty, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I think that just do it kind of that idea is very strong, but along with that is also you can't really care about what happens at first. I mean, when you first start, it's not gonna immediately explode into popularity. As Lexi said, I mean, we're 36 episodes in. We're not really huge at all. I mean, so you have to understand that it's not going to come quick, but as long as you're doing it and you're enjoying it, I think that's probably the most important thing.
Where can my listeners find your podcast at, the Pinstripe Podcast, on social media and podcast platforms?
So our Instagram is pinstripe.podcast. And then we are streaming. We have an Anchor page. It's under my name, I changed it. That's a lie. It is anchor.fm/the Pinstripe Podcast, which it then puts, if you search the Pinstripe Podcast in Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, I think that's what they're called, Spotify, and everywhere that you can listen to a podcast, if you search the Pinstripe Podcast, she'll come up.
That's amazing. Thank you again for your interview and best of luck with the Pinstripe Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at @talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again for your interview and best of luck with the Pinstripe Podcast.
Thank you.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.